Welcome back. You know, one of the most fascinating cartridges to me that was ever released in my lifetime was the 7mm-08 Remington. This little dandy right here is, you know, it's rather diminutive in many ways. It's a 308 cartridge. When you look at that, say against, you know, this cartridge here is a 300 Winchester Magnum. When you look at the cartridge against something like that, you say, well, you know, it's not up to modern standards. Okay, well, let's just go over the history a little bit and discuss what we're talking about in real terms. I guess it was probably about the early to mid 70s. I had at the time a model 660 Remington, which was the successor to the 600 Remington rifle. They had eliminated the silly plastic Delrin ventilated rib that they had put on the model 600, and the barrel was a plain barrel. It had a hideous looking sighting system on it, and the stock comb dropped quite a bit, and it was a splinter stock. The butt plate surface area was very, very small. That rifle kicked like a mule with the 308 cartridge, a standard out of the box 150 grain bullet. That really kicked terribly, and it was a very uncomfortable gun to shoot. It was probably the most uncomfortable gun I ever fired in my life. And you know, even more than any of the magnums I fired, it cut into your cheekbone as soon as you fired it because of that low comb. It had a lot of muzzle lift, and the lack of butt plate surface area really cut into you deeply. But I liked the rifle because I knew that, you know, I'm a pragmatist. You know, when I go hunting, I'm looking to shoot the game. It's a one-shot deal. But I always enjoyed carrying that gun around the woods, because carrying that gun was a very small, short, easy to handle gun. And despite the fact that it was one of the most peculiar looking guns with its dog leg bolt that you couldn't get your hand around in a hurry, it was always flipping out of your hand just when you were trying to crank the bolt back. It had the same bolt as the XP100 Remington pistol, the nylon pistol. With the 10-inch barrel that fired the 221 Fireball. It was the same action as that. But I liked the gun. It was a handy, you know, very delightful gun to carry around. And but I knew there could be someday something better down the road. Well, I think it was probably about the late 70s. I was at my late friend's house one night, and he was my shooting mentor. We did an awful lot of shooting through the years together, and he was a big 270 fan. If there ever was a 270 fan, he was one. He was the one that talked me into the 270 and got me to try it and get off my 3006 thing at the time, and you know, which is, to me, that was one of the best things I ever did, because that's what I shot most of my plains game with, was the 270. But I digress. We were talking one night in his living room about all kinds of things. You know, we were talking about different rifles, different cartridges. You know, and we were comparing ballistics of different cartridges. And I was leaving his house that night, and he said, you know, he says, if you had to choose your ideal cartridge, or if you had to make up a Wildcat, what would it be? And I said, well, actually the Wildcat I really would like is the 7mm-08. That was at the time, it hadn't been released yet. Well, lo and behold, only about a year or so later, Remington released the 7mm-08 commercially. You know, why would I say 7mm-08? Well, first of all, there's probably two bore diameters that share the greatest selection of bullet bullets available, and that would be 30 caliber and 7mm. There's a tremendous selection of bullet styles and shapes available throughout most of the manufacturers that make bullets. So that was one of the big considerations. Ballistic efficiency of the 7mm bore is very, very high. You know, all calibers can have the same ballistic coefficient and the same sectional density if they're appropriately lengthened or shortened, whatever the case may be. But you can arrive at the same ballistic qualities with any bore diameter, but at the cost of additional weight, for instance. So as you go up the scale, for instance, a 130 grain 270 bullet has the same ballistic qualities as a 140 grain or 139 grain 7mm bullet, which has the same ballistic qualities as a 165 grain 30 caliber bullet, and so it goes. And you can ramp it up all the way up. But obviously, you're dealing with higher and higher recoil, higher and higher attendant energy, burning more powder, so forth and so on. Now, again, I'm rather a pragmatist. You know, I don't use I don't use more than I need to use for anything in my life. I mean, no carpenter uses a 32-ounce framing hammer to build cabinetry. It's, you know, and you don't use a chainsaw to trim your shrubs. It's, you know, a logical person keeps his gun oriented towards his use. The idea of a 7mm-08 to the average person who immediately seized upon it when it came out was that it had more than sufficient energy and penetration and knockdown power for any deer-sized game. It had ample energy, as a matter of fact, for bear. When I say bear, I'm talking about black bear in the eastern woods and that sort of thing. It had more than sufficient range for the average pronghorn antelope hunter. You know, the average pronghorn antelope is, I know that you hear often about the 400-yard shots and the 350-yard shots and things like that, but in practical terms, you know, I know the guides, and most of the pronghorn antelope are probably shot within 275 yards or so, and that's within the capabilities, the ranging qualities of the 7mm-08, which really gets out there to about, very easily can handle 350-yard shots. So while it's not a 270, it certainly can fill the bill for the person who goes out occasionally for pronghorn antelope or even mule deer. But so you say, well, why not take a 270 with you? Well, I would take a 270 with me if I had two rifles. I'd take the 270. This is what I did. I had a 270 for plains game, and I used the 7mm-08 for the all-purpose sort of gun for the woods. And but if I had only one of those to choose, which would it be? For me, now I live east of the Mississippi. So most of my hunting is in the woods. I mean, I'm hunting most of the time in situations where the game is probably going to be shot at less than 30 yards. Even if if you're talking about a tree stand, you're talking less than 15 or 20 yards. I don't hunt that frequently anymore, and I probably won't be doing that much more hunting out west. So for the person who's doing most of his hunting in the east, the 7mm-08 makes an awful lot of sense. A great problem arises when you develop velocities that are in excess of 29 or 3,000 feet per second. When you develop velocities over 2,900 feet per second, a lot of things start happening to tissue that becomes overly destructive. Game is killed by tissue destruction. Now, I have mentioned this before. And I made a comment one time that brought a lot of people reacting to it negatively. I said that bullets do not kill by energy. And I'll repeat that, bullets do not kill by energy. Energy is one of the factors that affects the penetration of a bullet, its ability to penetrate, whether it be thick hide, bone, tissue, all these things. The energy is what helps get the bullet in there, get it in deeply. But it's the actual tissue destruction which creates the death of the animal. That's what stops the heart. That's what causes the massive bleeding in the lungs, and that's what basically puts the lights out. You know, energy without tissue destruction is virtually useless in the woods. That's why most states outlaw full metal jacket bullets, because there's plenty of energy there, but there's not enough tissue destruction, and an animal can run for an awful long time. Some animals can run for over a mile or more with a very, very serious mortal wound that they'll die from, but with no tissue destruction to effectively you know, bring him to a stop. So it's tissue destruction that does the damage, which causes the actual demise of the animal as quickly as possible and as humanely as possible. But what happens is when tissue destruction gets beyond the point where the lungs have been incapacitated, when the lungs are blown up, or when you know, and let me also clarify too, heart shots are not the best way to bring game down. Heart shots, animals can run a long time, shot through the heart. It's the immediate trauma that's affected in the striking of you know, lung tissue that really causes the most massive destruction. There's a lot of blood there in the lungs. There's a lot of capillary action that goes throughout the body, and that basically brings a lot of trauma to the animal. Shot through the heart, the heart can literally, and I've seen this. My friend shot a doe in a cornfield nearby with a 180 grain 30-06 bullet that completely, the heart was, I saw the heart, it was nothing more than strings of tissue. But that doe ran for 350 yards all the way to the other end of the cornfield, spraying blood everywhere. But that doe ran a long, long way. So it's the the more tissue destruction, which is basically caused by the large lobes of the lung, which is the most effective. But when you have a cartridge that really blows up that tissue, think about the woodchuck that is shot with high velocity, 224 diameter, 22 bullets, you know, like a 220 Swift or a 22 250. When a woodchuck or a prairie dog is struck at 150 or 200 yards, when that thing is still singing along at 3,700 feet per second or 3,600 feet per second, that animal literally blows up. And that's the sort of thing that occurs with high velocity, even though they're heavier constructed bullets and they're not varmint bullets per se, even though they're heavily constructed, it's the velocity, that impact velocity over 2,900 feet per second that really can upset so much tissue that it can cause an explosion of tissue throughout the edible meat. And you don't need that. You know, an animal is dead when he's dead. You don't have to overdo it. But that's where cartridges that live in that range between about, you know, 22 to 2,600, 2,700, 28, 2,900 feet per second. Those are the cartridges that bring home all the venison in this country. They always have. The 30-30, as puny as a lot of people will classify it at 2,200 feet per second, it brings home the venison. It's not the velocity, it's the tissue destruction with that big, broad 30 caliber bullet that has a lot of sectional density with a 170 grain bullet that penetrates and gets way in there and does a good job. So, you know, within its range, but I digress again. We're talking about a cartridge which is really fundamentally a very, very handy velocity range with a tremendously suited bullet for the purpose. We're talking about, in this case here, this is a hand-loaded 7mm-08 that I have shot many times in my Model 7, and the Model 7 is the successor to that 600 and 660. It's a beautified gun with a higher comb that doesn't strike your cheek, large butt plate area. It shoots beautifully, very accurately, and this recoil is classified. As a matter of fact, it's one of the few calibers that's typically made in the so-called youth and ladies models that can be shot by the average kid. And I'm not saying like a 10-year-old kid with a 80-pound frame. That I don't want to push that out there. But it's, for the average kid that is just getting used to shooting high-powered rifles, it's a dandy cartridge. It's a cartridge that has similar flight characteristics to most of the long-range cartridges. It can be easily pushed out there to 350 yards with a point-blank holdover without any, I should say point-blank hold without any holdover. It's a tremendously practical cartridge. What does it do at close range? Well, again, you're running at 28 to 2900 feet per second, and it does a fabulous job on deer. It's more than adequate energy for even black bear. And with the suitable bullets, it's been used. It's been around now for a long time. It's been around since 1980. So we're talking 36, 37 years that it's been around in a commercial form. And it's been used on everything. It has been used successfully on elk within its range with 160 grain bullets. Some people are now reporting that some of the better bullets, such as the AccuBond bullets and things like that, that even the 140 grain bullet with a slightly better trajectory is sufficient on larger game. I don't recommend that. I always have preferred, given my druthers, I'll take the heavier bullet. When it comes to larger game, I'll take the heavier bullet over the lighter one any day, simply because of the fact that that bullet has got just that much more ability to crack through bone, get into heavy tissue, and things like that. Sometimes your shot is not a perfect shot, and it doesn't necessarily offer a broadside shot right through the thinnest part of the ribs into the lung. Sometimes you have an angled shot where you need to get in a little deeper. So it's a great cartridge. The 7mm-08 has become one of the more popular cartridges in the country. You can go to any manufacturer of rifles, and they have a 7mm-08 available, usually in many different forms, in different models. It'll stand up for a long time. It's probably never going to achieve the popularity of the 308, simply because the 308 has that military heritage, and it's gonna always have. Anytime you have a military cartridge, it's going to be much more popular. It's always just been that way, whether it was the 30-40 Craig back in the turn of the century, or whether it was the 30-06, the 308. It's the 5.56 and the 223. The military cartridge always has that advantage of popularity. But aside from that, the 7mm-08 has got so much going for it. Great ballistic coefficient, tremendous sectional density that'll get in deeply and put an animal down in a hurry, and with great handling characteristics. It doesn't have excessive recoil, and it's extremely accurate. One of the things that can be said universally throughout all the different families of 308 based cartridges, whether it's 243, the 260 Remington is simply a 308 neck down, and all these cartridges, the 7mm-08 and the 308, and there's even 35 caliber renditions of it that are Wildcat. No matter what it is, these cartridges are all accurate because they have a good boiler room. It's a very well balanced cartridge. So if you're looking for a cartridge that will handle virtually any game in America. I would not bring it bear hunting, big bear hunting, but for virtually any game in America, especially if you're an eastern seaboard hunter that does most of his hunting in the forest and occasionally may go where shots are a little longer, and you don't want to be blowing your deer up and making a mess of what could have been a nice steak or something like that, then check out the 7mm-08. It's a great cartridge. It's gonna have a lot going for it for a long, long time. It's not going anywhere. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and God bless.